Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner, one of Israel's jewels. Many may not be aware of some of the important work that the Ben Gurion University does, and we're going to be looking at the American Friends of the Ben Gurion University in the Negev. Over 20,000 students go there. Growing area, a lot of new technology coming from the university. Our guest right now is Doug Seserman. He is the CEO for the last 4 years of the American Friends of Ben Gurion University. For about 15 years, he was executive director of the Federation, the Jewish Federation in Denver. Prior to that, he was a marketing executive. So for the last 20 or so years, he's been involved in the Jewish professional world. Doug, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Zev, so much for having us.
So how does it feel to be working for so many years, 20 years plus, in the Jewish world, so to speak?
Well, you know, it's always been good to be a Jew. Working for the Jews, that's good most of the time.
Not all the time, most of the time, okay.
Yeah, I love what I'm doing. I'm very passionate about the Jewish people, the relationship between the U.S. or the diaspora and Israel, and how we can work together to build a 21st century Zionist future that that the entire Jewish world can be really proud of. Israel is a modern day miracle. It's very unfortunate that so many people spend so much time arguing about what's wrong instead of focusing on what's right. And in essence, that's what we try to do. You mentioned American Friends for Ben Gurion University. We actually just rebranded ourselves. We used to be called American Associates, Ben Gurion University of the Negev, and we now call ourselves Americans for Ben Gurion University. We're the first American Friends to reimagine what that is, and we're just using the term Americans for. So we're a bunch of Americans, Jews and non-Jews alike, that are for Ben Gurion, his ideas for Israel, and why the Negev was so important, and the university that carries his name, and all the great work that it does to advance Israel and the future of Israel.
Why are you changing or rebranding the image of the university? Or at least the American Friends version?
Our prior name was called American Associates, Ben Gurion University of the Negev, and we were the only American Friends known as the American Associates. It was kind of a mouthful. Our acronym was AABGU. So now we're just A4BGU, Americans for Ben Gurion University. And we spend our time doing three things. We raise awareness for really what is the best kept secret, Israel, and we're hoping through programs like this one of yours that we can help get the word out. So we raise awareness. We ultimately raise resources. Like most philanthropic causes in Israel, they're dependent on the diaspora Jewry. The American philanthropists contribute about 60% of the annual fundraising, so that's key. And then we run programs. One of our signature programs we call the Zinn Fellows Leadership Program. It's an immersive experience for next generation Jews in the States to understand David Ben Gurion, the university, its impact on the Negev, et cetera. So that's who we are.
Now, the Negev is a growing area. People don't think about the Negev that much. They think about Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, other areas. They don't think much about the Negev, but the Negev is a growing area. More people are moving in there. And in fact, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, from what I've been reading, has been devoting more resources and moving more of what they do to the Negev.
You're exactly right. In fact, Zev, you couldn't have asked a question or pointed out the facts. In fact, David Ben Gurion always knew that the future of Israel would emerge from the Negev, and that's for a lot of different reasons. But today, the Negev, if you fold a map of Israel in half, you'll actually find the city of Beersheba right there at the geographic midpoint of Israel, and that's the entrance to the Negev. The Negev represents 60% of the entire landmass of Israel, and still today is less than 10% of the population. We have three campuses. You mentioned our 20,000 students. We have three campuses, the main campus in Beersheba, Sde Boker, which is where Ben Gurion is buried, and our what we call the Blaustein Institute for Desert Science. We're a world leader in water research and agri-technology, drip irrigation, all the water science that enables Israel to export water knowledge around the world and solve its own water problems. We have a campus in Eilat, the southern tip of Israel, where we do some incredible marine biology work, as well as our hotel and tourism management, one of our top ranked programs. One of the things that Ben Gurion also knew was that there's nothing contested, there's nothing to argue about as it relates to the Negev region. So some people will say, and I love all of Israel, but some people might say that Jerusalem really represents Israel's past. Tel Aviv represents the current modern Israel, and the Negev is what the future can be. So if you want to be involved in kind of reimagining and investing in the future of Israel, the Negev is really the perfect place to do that. There are lots of things that distinguish Ben Gurion University, but one of them is that in addition to research and education, we are the only university with a mandate for the region. So I call it the Stanford effect sometimes. If you take Stanford out of Silicon Valley, you have a nice place to live between Palo Alto and San Jose. With Stanford in Palo Alto, you create Silicon Valley. Same thing for BGU and its impact on the Negev. You mentioned the Israel Defense Forces moving south. That's exactly true. In fact, most people don't know that the largest infrastructure investment in the history of the modern state is happening right now, and that has to do with the Israel Defense Forces moving south. And we're very proud at Ben Gurion University in all the different ways that we collaborate with the Israel Defense Forces.
Well, that's important because I'm looking at some of the things that are taught at BGU, Ben Gurion University, and you mentioned alternative energy and desert and water research, which is important, but some of the things that I'm seeing are robotics and high-tech, nanotechnology, homeland and cybersecurity. These are all things which a lot of them are developed in the Army, and they filter back not only to Israeli society, but to the world, because Israel is a leader in high-tech and leader in startups.
You're exactly right. In fact, Beersheba has become Israel's cyber capital of the world, cyber capital of Israel, and one of the cyber capitals of the world, just sleepy Beersheba. So when you visit our campus, it's not really sleepy. You'll see cranes everywhere. Beersheba is one of Israel's fastest growing cities. And as I was mentioning before, we're kind of the best kept secret. To some degree, Beersheba or the Negev lives in the psychological periphery of Israel when it's really the center geographically and the key to the future. So in many ways, we're distinguished in many areas that we teach and do research. Technion is known as Israel's MIT, and it's a great institution. But we graduate almost as many engineers a year. We're an engineering power horse. We have an advanced technologies park that's adjacent to our university. Many foreign leaders and diplomats, when they're visiting Israel, they come to visit Beersheba to see what we call the innovation ecosystem, which is this collaboration between academia, a municipal region, commerce and industry, and the Israel Defense Forces. We're across the street from Soroka Medical Center, Israel's #2 hospital. We have 2 medical schools, one taught in English for mostly students from North America, one taught in Hebrew. Some of Israel's best doctors come from Ben Gurion University. So we're a total leader, and you mentioned AI and robotics. We might have the top robotic program in all of Israel. We have an initiative we call ABC Robotics, Agricultural, Biological, and Cognitive Robots. Beersheba was recently selected as Israel's Innovation District. We won over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa. This Innovation District is the notion of a walkable geographic center where you have cornerstone institutions like a university and a hospital, and then all the innovation that comes out of that kind of collaboration. So we're really proud. One of the things that we hope is that people come visit, whether it's virtually via webinar or an on-campus tour that you can take on our website. But when you go on your next trip to Israel, whether it's on your own with a Jewish federation or congregation, we really want people to see the future of Israel and its best showcased through the university and its impact.
We're speaking with Doug Seserman. He is the CEO of Americans for Ben Gurion University. That's their new name, Americans for Ben Gurion University. Over 20,000 students, and as you heard, cutting edge of teaching some of the latest technology, which not only will help shape Israel for the future, but also world technology as well. Let me ask you this, Doug. Walk me through it, because a lot of innovation, whether it's AI, other technologies being developed at Ben Gurion University. How does it work? Does it go through the Army? Does the university itself develop some of the products and markets it? Or do other people use some of the knowledge they get from the university and market it on their own? How does it operate? How does it work?
Well, first of all, if I really knew, I don't know that I'd be doing this job. I might be running one of these new unicorn billion-dollar companies coming out of Israel.
You can probably have an incubator there, right, at the university.
Well, exactly. What I can tell you is that it's absolutely remarkable, and that's why we use our tagline is called Partners in the Remarkable, because Israel is remarkable. It's a 20th century miracle. And today in the 21st century, Israel is contributing so many positive ways to the world. It's just a shame that there are so many people that aren't so positive about Israel. They get caught up in the tsunami, I call it sometimes, of the conflict, which is a very difficult thing to solve. And what we try to do is spend our work on the positive things that Israel does in terms of its contributions through innovation, et cetera. I'll say a couple of things about the secret sauce of the startup nation and how that's manifested through the university. But we were recently once again acknowledged as one of the top 50 universities on the planet for entrepreneurship. We have an initiative at the campus called Yazamut 360. Yazamut means entrepreneurship in Hebrew. And it's a bunch of programs that enable both students and faculty to take advantage of their ideas. Now, where do these ideas come from? They come from brilliant Jewish minds and brilliant non-Jewish minds that are at the university. They can come from our students, but also our scientists that do breakthrough work in computer sciences, et cetera. I've got a webinar tomorrow with one of our professors, Oren Shriki. He's in charge of BGU's NeuroHub, as an example. He's developed a wearable device that enables epilepsy patients to predict that a seizure is coming before the seizure actually comes, so they can find themselves in a safe space. Our Yazamut 360 program has what we call Cactus Capital. It's a student run VC that funds ideas by students for the world. We have what we call the Oasis Incubator. We have a new leaders program that has curriculum for people in their third year of school to help them with what's it take to build a company. We have all kinds of efforts where the DNA of the place, you might get your degree in, let's say, biology, but you're part of an ecosystem. So the DNA, or like the soul in a way of the university, has this startup nation entrepreneurial spirit. People study us to try to figure out, how did the Israelis do it? And the Ben Gurion University president, Daniel Shamovitz, he says it's the coffee. Somehow
it's not the water in the Negev. I will say it's the water that does it.
In New York, it's the water and the pizza that makes the pizza and the bagels, right?
Right.
But in the Negev, it's the coffee. And I think by that it means this is my interpretation, okay? The caffeine gets you going and makes you alert. And then BGU is a total leader in what they call multidisciplinary research, where you're bringing scientists from different disciplines together to solve a problem. Danny Shamovitz, he likes to be called Danny instead of Professor. Daniel Shamovitz is his formal name. But Danny created a COVID-19 task force of people from across the university to kind of come together and figure out ways to help solve the big challenge that we were all facing. In fact, BGU has its footprint all over the vaccinations, because the chief medical officer of Moderna, I don't know which shot you have in you, but the chief medical officer of Moderna, Dr. Tal Zaks, the BGU alum. We're very proud of him.
Well, a lot to be proud of. It's certainly cutting and innovations coming from Israel, and Ben Gurion University is part of that. And you mentioned, there's also medical research, a lot of things that are taking place. Now, you have a medical school. You mentioned you have about 1,000. What do you have? Students coming from North America. You teach that in English. Out of 20,000 students, how many do come from the United States?
So we need to grow that number, but just quickly back on the numbers, 20,000 students, about 2/3 of Ben Gurion University students are undergraduate programs. They're Israeli. And then 1/3 of our students are doing graduate work. Of the 1/3 of our students, so a little over 6,000 graduate students, you have around 1,000 international students, many students from China and India, where if you actually want to create great ambassadors across the world for Israel, you have them come study at Ben Gurion University. We have a little over 100 American students. Many of them are in our what we call the medical school for international health. We refer to them as the Tikkun alum doctors. We have one of the best medical schools in the world if you want to practice medicine in the developing world, or actually practice in major cities because of the diverse populations. And the Negev, with all the Bedouins and mix of Jews and Arabs, etc., it's a great petri dish, if you will, for how to do great medical work for the developing world.
A wonderful thing that you're accomplishing. Now, final question, though. You mentioned about people can visit, and you encourage that right now. Israel, because of Corona, it's taking a while for a lot of tourists to come to Israel. I'm not sure when it's going to be fully open. So you mentioned virtual tours. Do you have virtual tours using AI and other technologies so people get a feel for what's going on if they do it virtually?
Yeah, you just gave me the next great idea. Add AI to our virtual tours. We'll work on that.
I think it'd be great.
We have a vision, by the way, that we house the Ben Gurion archives in the Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism. And I have this dream of a hologram of David Ben Gurion.
I was just thinking about that, doing a hologram. That'll be the opening when you go to the virtual tour.
Yeah, we have all his writings, all his great sayings, and unfortunately his mind has been a little bit lost in time, his ideas. And so we're trying to bring it back. So I'm hoping someday that you can interact with a hologram of David Ben Gurion, ask him questions, and we'd be able to understand what he might say about modern day challenges. But in terms of our website, is a great resource. It's Americans for BGU.org. Americans for BGU.org is our website. You can kind of find all kinds of things about breakthrough research that Israel's doing. And there is a section where you can kind of take a virtual tour of our 3 campuses. There's also a brochure there around visiting Israel. And one of our goals is to be one of the organizations in the States that partners with congregations, federations really well, where our content from the university fits with the pro-Israel programming of other organizations. And we invite that partnership. So people can connect to me by email, doug@americansforbgu.org, and I even give out my mobile phone number, 303-881-9797. People can reach me, text anytime. We love to get you involved in our work.
Give out that number one more time.
So my mobile number, my wife's going to kill me, 303-881-9797. The 303 is Colorado.
I was going to say, are you based in Colorado or are you based in New York now? Or you're based in Israel?
I live in both places. You know, they say you can take the kid out of Colorado, but you can't take the Colorado out of the kid. But our headquarters is in Manhattan, and I spend time both in Manhattan and in Denver. And we're a national organization and have donors, thank God, all over the country supporting the future of Israel via Ben Gurion University.
Doug Seserman, the CEO of the newly branded, it's called Americans for Ben Gurion University. Thank you for giving us an insight of really what a hidden jewel of Israeli know-how, education, but training the next AIs, the next innovation. Israel is a startup nation, and part of it is due to the work and research at Ben Gurion University. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you, Zev.
And we're